So good morning or good evening, hello. Welcome to a knitting episode from me here in overcast but warm Denmark. Also windy Denmark, so again I'm taking a chance here sitting outside. I hope the sound will still be okay. I know that it can be a little tricky and one or two people prefer that I sit inside, but I prefer that I sit outside. I'm going to be inside sooner rather than later, so I hope you can live with the ambient noise. I hope you're well. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Helle. I'm coming to you from Odense on the island of Funen, or Fyn in Denmark. And it's the end of the summer vacation. In fact, it's the summer vacation is already over for most of us. It's been a month of slow knitting, I think. Summer projects for sure, but it's sort of been on and off productive. Perhaps it's the same for you, because one of the things that I've done is that I went hiking in the Swiss Alps, and you can't really knit while you hike. You can knit at the hotel at night, but you're pretty exhausted. So I have had some knitting with me, and it's been a really good travel project. But apart from that, I've also just chilled. Enjoyed the fact that I didn't have to be so productive over the summer. Now I'm back in business, back to work, back with the knitting, you might say. And on the program today I have 2 finished objects and 3 new cast-ons, 3 new WIPs that I've been working on off for the past 3 weeks or so. And I wasn't supposed to have 3, but they sort of happened organically. That's what you call things when you don't really have much control over them, I think. So slightly surprising for myself that I have 3. I always considered myself a monogamous knitter, but I've found that knitting on 2 different kinds of projects delight me. And then a 3rd project just sort of entered my life a little coincidentally, and a 4th might be waiting in the wing, but I'll talk about all of that. If you've been here before, you know that I like to begin with a quote, and I feel that I'm harping on about the same thing, kind of, but it's something that a friend and I have talked about recently, and I've had occasion to practice the sentiment quite a lot, but it's the whole idea of caring less. That doesn't mean you become cold or careless or indifferent. Not quite. In Danish we have this thing, or have had this thing called press the pyt-knap. And pyt is sort of, oh well, or never mind, or, not to bother. And it's a little easy to say something like that, but I've had occasion, I always do, to remember the quote, is there another way of looking at this, from A Course in Miracles. And that was recently when someone had some opinions about what I'm wearing. I'll get back to that perhaps. I also had occasion to remember some of these quotes recently when my youngest daughter went through some heartbreak. And I didn't quite remember the quote, so I just think I said something along the lines of, don't let anybody or anything external decide your sense of worth. And it reminded me of an Eleanor Roosevelt quote that you probably know. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And I imagine many of us have to remind ourselves of that from time to time. And that often means that we have to shift our perspective. Maybe whatever somebody did it's coming from a place of pain, or they feel a need to be negative, and don't let that influence you. Don't allow it to influence you. I subscribe to the newsletter of this American author called Mark Manson, who's pretty smart. He can also be a little tough and yeah, but he said you really become stronger if you decide not to let other people's opinions of you matter that much. And it's sort of all the same thing. And I think no matter how old we are, we have to remember that every now and then. So that's my 2 cents in terms of quote for the day. Let's see if I can actually go down a different tangent next time for a quote. I also just want to introduce the whole summer knitting a little, because 2 years ago I thought summer knitting was absolutely not for me. I was in the knitting game for the sweaters, and I still am. But you know, there comes a time when you have to be realistic about how many sweaters you need and can wear. But of course, this whole act of creating is not a practical act in that sense. You do partly look, at least I do partly look in my wardrobe and think, what would I like? Where is there a gap? Where are my needs at? But also I let myself be delighted, and sometimes that's not necessarily practical, and I don't care. It's my hobby. But I've become more fond of summer knitting to my own surprise. One of the reasons is obviously to have more summer garments, because there's so many months in the year where I just, not necessarily many months, but at least it seems to me more months or more weeks now than previously where I simply can't wear woolen sweaters. So for that reason, certainly. Otherwise, I'll be knitting on something in July and it'll be 3 months before I can wear it. And here I also include things that could perhaps have long sleeves and are perhaps a little more transitional than the heavy woolen warm sweaters. But I also find that I like knitting with cooler yarns in the summer. I just can't sit with a whole lot of wool, especially when I went traveling and it was even hotter than here in Denmark. So it's also a question of knitting with something that is comfortable, even here in August, where I might not get to wear it a whole lot this year, but then I will next year, and it's still a more comfortable knitting experience, because the yarn, silk, linen, whatever, is a little cooler and a little more comfortable to sit with. And then it opens up variations, it opens up new opportunities. So by the time spring rolls around, everybody's looking at spring and summer patterns, which means that suddenly you have new takes on your knitting, I find, and especially also if you can get into things that you don't normally knit. In my case, a bag, where I'd really like a hat as well. And so right now I'm still into the summer projects, summer knitting, and I'm not looking at people's what to make during the autumn videos, because I'm not there yet. Autumn is gonna come, that's for sure. So I'll get to that when I get to that, and I'm trying to savor the summer that we still have, including knitting wise. Okay, so my first finished object is of course what I'm wearing, which is the Ample Tee by Wiese Knit, who's a Danish designer, Camilla Wiese, and I knitted it in mulberry silk from A Knitter's World, who I've talked about before. I think if you saw my last video, you saw the beginning of this. Camilla calls it a calm classic design, which I would absolutely agree with, but then it also has this more sort of what I would consider minimalist look, slightly oversized. And my last finished object was the crystal sweater, which had some lace work. It was wool and it had a V-neck, so here I'm sort of for myself going in another slightly other direction. It's simple and it has these very open armholes that I really like. I've worn it a few times already and I've really enjoyed it. It was about 24 degrees Celsius and it was not too hot, not too cold, even though it's actually knitted in 2 strands of the mulberry silk, which Bettina from A Knitter's World said would be a little heavier than the original one, which is knitted in another type of silk yarn, but it's absolutely not too heavy. I really enjoy it, and it contributes to the drape that I really like. The colorway is Cherry Blossom. Oh, I also wanted to say I like the combination of the sort of somewhat minimalist design with the blush rose color, which to me is kind of not, I don't know why, but I think of it as not necessarily a minimalist color. So it's that balance between something which is, I guess, kind of romantic, and then something which is simple and minimalist. I like that combination. And as you'll see in one of my current works in progress, I like the opposite combination as well. The gauge here is 22 stitches, and 29 rows, and it called for a 4mm needle or US 6. I went down to a 3.5mm needle, which I never do, or I never size down. I only did it because this yarn is a little thicker, so in order to get gauge I had to go down, and that was no problem. There's a positive ease of 15 to 30 centimeters, so quite a big gap. I think mine has about 15 or 20 maybe. I'll write on screen how much that is in inches, I forgot to check. And the sizes go up to 150 centimeters for the finished garment. But as I think I also mentioned in my last video, you can easily add more increases here if you need them, and make it bigger yourself. It's a relatively simple construction, and you don't need a whole lot of math skills to alter the fit, I think, and size a little more up. It's worked top down, and it has some short rows in the back to raise the back just a little bit. It has, as you can see here, increases on the shoulder, and then it has decreases underneath the arm, so that you reach fewer stitches before you do the ribbing for a kind of cinched in look. And here it's a twisted ribbing. I only twisted the knit stitches because you're not going to see the back end, so you don't have to see the you don't have to twist the pearls because you're not going to see the pearl stitches. I forget if she asked you to do that. Some designers sometimes do that even though you don't see them, and I find that it's the twisted pearls that are a little rough on my hands, so if I don't need to do them, I don't. It looks to me exactly the same. And then it finishes with a nice Italian bind off. There's an option of an I-cord that you can add to it. I didn't do that because the photos that I'd seen where she's wearing it, the designer's wearing it, she doesn't have an I-cord, and I like that look, a little more of a raw edge and also slightly more open, so I prefer that. I got 4 skeins of mulberry silk for it because of converting the original yarn to the yardage needed here, but I actually have almost what amounts to 1 skein of yarn left. This is how much yarn I have left, and the skeined up. Here you can maybe also see the color a little closer. It's kind of a cool, dusty, blush light pink. A really beautiful color, and it's slightly variegated, but not overly so for my taste at least. I think it's really beautiful. I can highly recommend this yarn. And if you've, oh my gosh, I get out here and it was overcast, and I thought, good, nice angle. I could sit here overcast. Now the sun comes out. Not gonna complain. But if you've been here before, you'll have heard me wax on about my ridiculously sensitive skin, and that I often find something a little too scratchy. Well, of course, since this is silk, it's not scratchy at all. Last year I knitted the Kutar top by Sari Nordland in Knitting for Olive barrette silk, and it's completely different. This is mulberry silk, and it's super soft. The barrette silk is also not, doesn't irritate my skin at all. It's a really lovely silk to work with, but it looks a little more like linen. It doesn't have a sheen, and it's not sort of fuzzy soft like this one. This one is, yeah, I'm tempted to say that it's a little more fuzzy soft. Maybe you can see here that there's just a slight fuzz there. So I've already imagined that maybe one could make a sweater in this. Of course, you'd have to be really careful about what kind of design, because it's going to be slouchy, drapey, but I think it would be gorgeous. It's so lovely, and of course even here where it's directly on my skin, the whole thing is directly on my skin. So I really love this yarn. I have here about 108 grams left, and of course it's kind of thin. It's probably fingering weight. I don't know what to make of this. I could buy one more skein. They might be a little different, but I could alternate, but I want to use this for something. Not sure what. If you have any ideas, by all means, I'm definitely open to some ideas. I was a little worried about having too open an armhole so that you could just look into my body, but the problem was that, or the thing was, I was drawn to the silhouette, the slope over the shoulders, and that sort of, yeah, drapey armhole here. And I definitely didn't want it to end up here. I've seen a few people where it ended quite far up, although the designer, for her, it ended far down, maybe because she has narrower shoulders. So I looked at a lot of the photos on Ravelry and on Instagram and checked people's notes to make sure that I would get the slope and the drape, etc., the fit that I like. I also didn't quite meet row gauge, which I rarely do, so I added a few more rounds of increases here to make sure that it would sort of drape over my shoulder and down to maybe the top middle part of my arm. And then I did join the front and the back a little sooner than I think the pattern stated, maybe 1 or 2 centimeters, so that the hole here wouldn't become too gapey, too open. And I think, yeah, to me, it I like the way it fits. I also remember that it tells you at some point to break the yarn, and I did not break the yarn. I think I continued on the front, or made the front to ensure that they were the same length. And when I got to the length that's required before starting the ribbing, I washed and blocked the whole thing because I felt that it would probably grow a little in length. And for this look, if it's too long here, the whole sort of body of the sweater would droop over the ribbing and hide the ribbing, and that's not the way it's designed, and it's not what I wanted either. I liked the photo I'd seen where she was wearing it, and so I washed and blocked it, and sure enough it had grown. So I actually had to unravel maybe about 4 centimeters, which was tricky. It wasn't tricky to unravel, but the decreases I'd made here, then I had to sort of unravel maybe 4 centimeters, reknit maybe 2, and then I had to rethink the whole decreases situation. I think I made pretty much the same decreases so that the seam looking thing under the arm would look the same, but then I've made a few more decreases, when I began the ribbing. I didn't actually have to do that because I went down half a needle size, or half a millimeter needle size, for the ribbing as per the pattern, and I probably shouldn't have done that because it's a little tight, although I think it has already stretched a little, so it's okay. It depends on what sort of fit you want, but I didn't necessarily need to go down a needle size, so because it's already ribbing, so it cinches in a little. One thing I also did when I was knitting it is that I turned it inside out so as not to agitate the outside of the pattern too much, because it's a sort of delicate fabric, it's silk. I didn't want to make sort of little sort of extra fuzzy knots on it or anything, and that was actually fine. So for any beginning knitters, that's a recommendation for certain yarns to turn it inside out when you knit in the round, certainly if it's more delicate yarns like silk. But also certain woolly yarns, I think if they're not too rustic, then it might be a good idea to turn it inside out. I often do that. Okay, so I'm happy with this. I've already, as I said, worn it with these particular pants so as not to look overly romantic. And I really like it. And it was an engaging but easy knit. Lots of stitches, I have to say. At one point when I thought about the ribbing being slightly tight, I didn't even consider unraveling and re-knitting because the stitches are so small with a 3.5 millimeter needle, which I think is a US 4. I'm like, no. So I'm happy with this. Alright, so my next finished object is this lovely bag by Knit called Sarang bag, and right now I haven't put anything in it, so it looks maybe a little strange. I could put some yarn in, of course, why not? Although that's not a whole lot, but this was the project that I had with me when I went to Switzerland during my vacation or hiking trip. And after we returned from Switzerland the following week, my daughter had to go to My daughter, no, she didn't have to. She went to Italy to visit a friend that she'd been to school with who's half Italian. She went with a friend, and we drove them to Copenhagen airport, and then we continued to Sweden and drove up the west coast of Sweden. It's always lovely to go to Sweden. And I brought this project with me. I think I had begun and was maybe about here. So you begin with the bottom. Let me remove this yarn again. I can show you. It's what I would call kind of a beachy bag. So you begin with this bottom, which is sort of like a basket weave. And then you pick up stitches along the sides, and then you knit the sides up. So I guess you could call it bottom up, but that's logical in this connection. And it's a lace pattern that is also used in the Sarang sweater that I made last year, which is full of cables, and then there's this section where there's some lace pattern. So you can perhaps see here what it looks like. And I love this bag so much. I've worn it. Is that what you say about a bag? No. I've brought it with me a few times already, and have had some compliments on it for sure. One of my friends who's recently become a knitter is already keen to knit it, so I may have to guide her a little. The yarn, let me show you the yarn. Right now, this is not what it looks like when you buy the skeins. You can see here, this is a tangled mess. Whoop. But this is what the yarn looks like when you ball it up or skein it up. So it's Lang Yarns Creolino. Oh, I forget the color. I'll put it on here. But there's no mistaking this color. It's kind of a rattan color, I think. And it's 3 strands. And 3 strands can be a little tricky to manage, but it's, I think, necessary to use 3 strands because you need something that's a little sturdy where you can carry things in. The last time I brought it with me, I had in it sunglasses and a sun case for my sunglasses, my wallet, I think a bottle of water, a library book, a sweater. You want to be able to carry all those things without it breaking or gaping or anything like that. So 3 strands of that and 6 skeins in all. I have this bit left, and I think I have this left because I think Karolina's bag is maybe slightly longer. I saw it before I began knitting in it. She said if I wanted less of a droop, I could stop with the lace pattern before the pattern tells you to. And I think I wanted that because it depends on what size of bag you want. If you want a huge beach bag where you can put in a towel, of course you got to make it longer. But I had seen already a bag by another designer last year that looked nice, but it looked so long and droopy, and that's not really what I was going for. And also I didn't want it to be too heavy to carry on my shoulder. So this has the length that I liked. What you are also encouraged to do in the pattern, certainly when you knit the straps, is to stretch them a little because it will give when you begin to use it. Oh yeah, when you have knitted the sides using the lace pattern, then you do the basket weave again for the edges here, and then you place stitch markers for where you begin the straps, and then you make 2 straps of the same length, and you attach them to the other sides to the live stitches using a 3 needle bind off. So it's simple. It does take a while, but I knit this tightly. I did not gauge swatch. I used the recommended needle in the pattern, which is a 4mm or US 6. I could have perhaps gone up to a 4.5mm, but who cares? It's a bag. So it did, it did take a while here, but I think it was also really lovely. The pattern becomes intuitive after a while. If you're a beginning knitter, of course, also if you're experienced knitter, but then I would recommend that you write down which row you're on. I think it's over 4 rows, the pattern repeat, and you can sometimes forget where you are. After a while, you can read your knitting, but if you're not used to reading your knitting, it's a good idea to make little notes where you are. What row have you just finished? For me, it was an intuitive pattern after a while, but you do need to, of course, knit a little before it becomes intuitive, but then it's just smooth sailing, I think. The tricky bit is to get all the 3 strands, or actually that's not the tricky bit. The tricky bit is that it gets all entangled, at least mine did. And that's because at one point, I used one strand from one ball of yarn, and then I used one more ball of yarn only and used strands from both ends. I can't recommend that. That became a whole big mess, and I sat in a hotel room somewhere in Switzerland just spending the whole evening trying to unravel and balling it up. So do yourself a favor, use from 3 different balls, but maybe ball them up first if you use this particular yarn. There's also, I think, a yarn alternative in the pattern, which is the Isa Japanese cotton, japansk bomuld, and I really like this color and the yarn. I would love to knit a hat, kind of one of these sort of slouchy beach hats, or whatever you call them, summer hats. I've only seen a crocheted one made by Paula Strict, I think, and it's really cute, but I don't crochet. So either I will have to learn to crochet, or I'll see if I can find a knitted pattern that looks similar. I really like the look of it. I think probably because it's crocheted, it has sort of a whimsical look, and I think this is also whimsical and at the same time simple, practically minimalist. And I kind of like when something can do both of that. And I also absolutely love having knitted a bag and not another sweater, another top. So I'm definitely all about that now. I think it's fun. It's a quicker project. It's gratifying, and it certainly does fill a hole in my wardrobe. I guess you still call it when it's a bag. And when I was done knitting it, it was a little more bunched up, but I felt I didn't want to wash it. And I think it also tells you in the pattern to steam it, and so I steam blocked it, and I put it over my ironing board and put a dishcloth and then steamed it, and that worked fine. Of course, it's linen, so it's okay with high temperatures, so I just sort of pressed it gently, and then it opened up nicely. And as I said, it was really lovely as a travel knit, and then after a while I could carry the yarn in here, so that was practical. And yeah, it's really cute, I think. I love it. So very happy with that, very happy with having knitted a bag. Just wanted to show you what the bag looks like when you're wearing it, or carrying it, I should say. Looks way more bulky now, of course. Maybe even it may look a little bigger, depending on what sort of objects, of course, you put in here. So I have with me a project bag with some knitting in, a book, Edith Wharton, and sunglasses. And I could have put more stuff in here if I'd wanted to. And also, you can see where it hits me. I think Karoline made her version with slightly longer straps, so she can use it crossbody, and that's also an option. There's also a knitter on Instagram whom I would recommend that you go follow, Ingun, called Strik med Katten, who made it even larger and then added leather straps. I think that she'd saved for another project. And of course, it's also an option that you put a lining in there, but you don't have to. I'm not gonna. And also, it exists in a smaller size where you make an I-cord for straps. And this is the larger size, of course. So yeah, just wanted to show you that. And oh, it's the same lace pattern that is on the Urium top as well by Knit that I knitted last summer. So I haven't actually worn them together. I'm not a very matchy kind of person, but the matching is subtle here, I think. Okay, so now I'll move into the works in progress, things that I'm working on now. And the first thing that I cast on was the Agave by Yumiko Alexander, and I'd seen it maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and was like, that looks really interesting and delicate and kind of origami like. Maybe I just think origami because I presume from the name that she's Japanese. Then I saw a video by Easily Knitfluenced where she goes through Japanese patterns. I can highly recommend that video. She's half Japanese, so she pronounces the names beautifully correctly. And she also showed it. I'm like, I really should get to that soon. So I've knitted the front. You knit it bottom up, and it's in two pieces. First you knit the front, then you knit the back, and then you seam them together here, and then you pick up for sleeves. And there are two sleeve options, which I think is really lovely. I often find that there are different sleeve options in Japanese patterns. There's one that's called flutter sleeve that goes more or less to the elbow, and then there's a long sleeve option. I'm going to go for the short sleeve option, and though it does actually look maybe a little more romantic, that's something I would normally go for. I like the way it falls over the shoulder, and I also like the I don't know, there's something vintage looking about the sleeves that I really enjoy. So this is as far as I've gotten. What you can see here is that it looks a little wider at the top. She tells you to block it aggressively before you seam them, and as you can see, I have not actually bound off because I'm thinking that I can do a 3-needle bind off instead, which probably for me would make it a little neater over here, simply because I'm not too confident with my own seaming, and I also don't love seaming, to be honest, and you already need to seam it a little down here, only from here down, because this is where you have the flutter sleeve. So I don't know, do you think it would work with a 3-needle bind off, or is there a reason why she doesn't suggest that in the pattern? I'm not sure, but you can see that it's going to be sort of like that, and then the sleeves are going to be down here. And there's a bit of lace also on the sleeves, and then I believe they're not seamed, so they're open. The back looks almost the same, except you don't have the first lace pattern here, presumably to have sort of an even back, although you don't, I've seen some people on Ravelry still do it on the back. I felt I would do it as per the pattern so I could see what's what, not that it matters. The yarn that I'm using here is Lune by Sentness Garn, and it's in a kind of oatmeal-y color, although it's actually called pearl gray. Let's see what it's color 3820, and this kind of pale gray, light gray, which I think is a little more oatmeal compared to another gray that I'm working on. But as I said when I was talking about amplitude, this one is you've got the sort of delicate color and the minimalist design. Here I think this is definitely a neutral, if there's ever a neutral, and I don't know why I think neutral and minimalist go together, but I guess that I do somehow. So I think I liked pairing that with a little more delicate and detailed design, and also I just tried this color. I wanted something else. I was tempted to use the off-white that she uses in the pattern, but the two summer tops I made last year were in off-white, so I thought I would try something different. Everybody had been talking about Lune for years, and I just always looked at it and thought, one day maybe. And this was a very luxurious and lovely yarn, so I thought I'll just try something maybe a little simpler and not so expensive. And this was really inexpensive. And also I had seen Beth McDonald Stone knit this, and she had used the Lune, and I thought, okay, if Beth can do it, I think I can use the Lune as well. And I'd already been wanting to try it, so I'm interested to see what it's going to be like. Someone told me that it's warm, maybe on her, so I don't know what it's going to be like on me. It is 53% cotton, 33% viscose, and 14% linen. So it's a summer yarn, of course, and it's not the tjuk, it's not the tun, it's the original Lune. So let's see how that is gonna look. as an aside here, can I just say that I think it's really cool that Beth McDonald Stone, as a designer, knits other people's designs. I imagine she does it also to not just knit on her own stuff. And at one point she said in another video where she Euro sweater by Egonet that when she travels, she doesn't want to be, worried or concerned about her own designs and taking notes and all that, but just taking a break from that, which I think sounds really cool. I like that you dip your toes into other people's design from time to time. So I'm excited to see what it's going to look like when I get the finished product. I expect it to be kind of airy and have a nice sort of drapey silhouette with some details. After I'd finished this and the ribbing on here, it was fun to just cast on and knit. And of course here it's no big deal having to knit bottom up because well, I guess that's not entirely true. I went for the shortest option. There are 3 different options, but I think here I have one big pattern repeat and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the smaller repeats. And if you want it longer, you would just add either 1 or 2 more repeats. So in the beginning I'm like, yay, this is so satisfying, woo, knitting lace, and then stocking it over here, lovely. And then about here I'm like, oh my gosh, this is getting slightly boring. And then when I got up here, for some reason it was like, ooh, I'm up by the last repeat now, and then I need to go into the ribbing. I was all excited again. So I do think it's satisfying and relatively quick knit for me, certainly. Relatively quick. Let's see. Oh yeah, and it has a twisted ribbing at the top. Of course you could opt not to do that, but I quite like that look. And so pretty much you're done with the front. Now just need to start the back, and it shouldn't take too long, I hope. I am confident that I will get to wear it before summer is over, depending on the temperatures, but you could always wear something underneath this, which I think looks pretty cool as well. In my last video I talked about the crystal sweater being knitted bottom up and that it felt daunting, and I failed to mention that it also felt satisfying, because it's like, even though I had to do some math and things like that, once you've sort of dipped your toes into knitting bottom up, you're no longer as afraid if another pattern is knitted bottom up. And so, the more things you try out like that, the more things are open to you, which I think is a good thing. Alright, let me remove that. The next thing that I'm working on, and which has taken hours already, but it's on small needles, 3.75 millimeter. Is that a US 5? I only had one 3.75 millimeter needle, and then I put a 4 millimeter or US 6 on the other end, also knowing that I could maybe be a little tight with the purling on the wrong side. So this, I've slowly just begun the Lune shawl by Natasha Hornby, and I'm so excited about this project. I cannot even tell you. It was a project that was in my queue for a very long time, and it's going to remain on my needles for quite a long time. It's going to probably be one of those that I take with me into the autumn and finish maybe, a few months from now, because it does take quite a while. Every single row you need to refer to the pattern to check what to do. But it's mosaic knitting using 3 colors, but only one at a time. And when I first saw it, I was already in doubt, what yarn should I use, because she uses quite rustic yarns. And for a shawl that you want to be able to wear around your neck, that was not an option for me, unfortunately. So when I went to London over Christmas, I visited Loop of London, the yarn store in London that one of the yarn stores I'd heard about. And I bought Woolfolk yarn Tunt, which means thin, and I bought, these are the skeined up yarns, and I'll put in the show notes what colors they are, but an off-white, sort of a cool off-white, light gray, and a dark charcoal gray with maybe a hint of something, a hint of a blue tone maybe. So I tried to find colors that looked similar to hers, although I didn't necessarily need them to be exactly the same. And in her pattern she uses a navy blue, where I'm choosing a gray. And the reason why I wanted this particular color combination is also that I saw a pattern by Stephen West already back in December. I forget what it was called, but it was to do with some kind of knit along over Christmas, where there was a kit available at Stephen and Penelope's in Amsterdam, and I logged onto their website seriously about 15 minutes too late to get my hands on any of the kits, which was a bummer. And I'd seen the shawl. It was sort of different. It was like a gradient with a dark gray and then a medium gray and then a light gray and then an off-white, or maybe even more. It was just so beautiful. So I couldn't get that color combination out of my mind. And I thought, well, this is not a gradient in that sense, but it has the same color combination, same color family, and I really like that. And this yarn is super, super soft. It's perhaps also a little thinner than the yarn she uses, although it is fingering. But I was, when she suggested the needle size, I thought, should I size up then, since I probably knit tighter as per usual? And then I saw that the recommended needle for this is around 3 to 3.5 millimeter. So I thought, no, I don't want too gapey a fabric. So I stuck to the 3.75 and the 4. And then if it's not wide enough, I can tell already now that I can block it to achieve more length. So that's going to be okay. It's a really detailed and really lovely pattern. And I've knitted one of Natasha Hornby's patterns before, so I was familiar with how she explains things. And it's nice to also know different designers' way of explaining things. She's quite detailed, and I enjoy that. Not overly detailed. And I have to say that I definitely also feel I'm upgrading my knitting game here. And I enjoy that. I was, when I cast on, I felt so excited. And you cast on here. So, and then you begin increases on one side, and then none on the other. And then it just grows from there. So, as I said, I expect that this is going to be on my needles for a while. I have to finish, or I want to finish the Agave, and also a couple of other projects are lurking. And one of them is, they're both test knits. One is a maybe test knit, one is a for sure test knit. And of course, although there's a deadline on one of them, but the other there isn't. I do want to finish them first. And also, I'm not probably going to wear a shawl around my neck just yet. It's going to be a month at least. So I do have time to knit on this. And for me, it's also definitely a process knit. I really enjoy knitting on it and just taking my time, savoring, okay, now I'm at this section and now I need to do this. So here I'm moving towards the middle of the top part, where there's going to be another of these pattern sections with a dark yarn, and then I'll make increases. That's going to create the top part of the shawl, and then you pick up stitches all the way around to create the bottom part. So yeah, I'm excited for every step here, and it's such a joy to knit. But it's definitely also it's something that requires patience. But if nothing else, it gives you patience. You need to find your ability to be patient with this. But at the same time, it's so gratifying. I find satisfying. Okay, so the final work in progress was a work in progress this morning, until I forgot one of the strands. It's 2 strands that are held together, and I had to unravel. By the time I'd unraveled to pick up the lost strand, I had to sort of go back over some German short rows, and those stitches did not look neat at all. So I unraveled the whole thing. It wasn't more than maybe 3 centimeters, but it was still annoying. So I have to cast back on. But I'll show you the yarn and tell you about the sweater or the blouse. It's a blouse by Agave called Seoul blouse. Seoul as in the capital of South Korea. She first posted it a while back, and I just nearly swooned. And I was lucky enough to be able to be part of the test group. And the yarn is a mix of both yarns are from Gepard Garn, Danish yarn company, and one of them is linen and silk, and it's this one. This is the main color, and then pairing that with cashmere lace in a more creamy color. I think this one is called marzipan. And there are going to be some stripes. I put those in inverted commas because they don't look like regular stripes. They did more to begin with, but she, for various reasons, has had to change the stripe. But the stripe will be in this color combination. So again, linen silk mixed with cashmere lace. And this is like a slightly variegated black. It's called black, but it's gray black perhaps. And then this is the cashmere lace in true black. And I'm really looking forward to it. It's one of those, I think, transitional knits again. So of course it's not a summer top. It's a blouse for when it's not very cold. And the stripes are going to be sort of a mix between something that looks like a graphic regular stripe and then like Korean script or an Asian script language, and I really love that look. And of course it's perfect for the name Soul Blouse. And it's going to be like kind of similar to this, kind of with a boat neck and then long sleeves and just a loose drapey fit. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's been a few days since I recorded the main part of the video, and in the meantime I've had time to cast on the Soul Blouse and knit the first stripe. So you can see a sneak peek of it here. You might be able to tell or to see what I meant by the mix between a regular stripe and the Korean script. So this is what it looks like in its early stages. And oh, by the way, the quote, the reason why I brought that up. So somebody had found it necessary to tell me that she didn't like this particular neckline. And she didn't find it flattering, and she would feel that it choked her. And I'm like, I'm not sure what to do with that comment, because clearly I like it. That's why I knitted it. You don't have to. In fact, you don't even have to share that opinion. The option is there. We have this thing in our brain that enables us to stop ourselves from saying stuff that we think. It's a fantastic little thing up in our brain. I guess you could call it your little editor. So I just had a moment there where I'm like, why would you say that? The whole do unto others as you would have others do unto you springs to mind again. You will see things here that probably speak to you sometimes, and sometimes you will see things that don't speak to you, because we all have different tastes. Thank God, it's diverse and there's room for that. Fortunately, I just hope we can create space for all of it, and if there's something you don't like, that's absolutely fine. There are tons of things I don't like out there. I rarely have a need to express that unless somebody actively asks for my opinion. And even so, that would be my opinion and not necessarily somebody else's opinion. So as my daughter says, you do you. I have possibly one more test knit, but that's in a very woolly yarn. I've thought about using Newton. I have some Newton stash for it, but I know that there's a risk of me breaking out in a rash, and it's also really hot, and I just couldn't deal with that when it's still hot or at least warm outside. So I've put that on hold for a while, but I would still very much like to knit it. But I will keep you abreast of that if and when I get to that. And in the meantime, I will get back to my knitting here. I've been watching quite a bit of the Olympics while knitting on it. That's been fun, especially when that Swedish pole vault jumper made a world record. I don't know. That was just a fun moment. It's fun to see Paris in the whole Olympics thing. It's fun to see people from all over the world compete in all sorts of different sports that some of them I didn't even know existed. It's amazing. I love that. So I can sort of, with good conscience, sit and watch the Olympics because I'm knitting. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. And I forget always to say thank you for your comments, but I really do appreciate them. I'm sorry that it takes me a long time between the knitting episodes, but I do feel that I need to have something substantial to show you, and of course that takes time. And also sometimes if I've made another video, I need to sort of re-energize before I record again. And I also hope that it was okay for you to sit outside with me, just maybe for the last time this year. I will probably be inside again sooner than you know it, and then there will be no sounds. I hope that you're finding joy with whatever you're knitting on, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much, and have a great end of summer or end of winter, depending on where you are.